Today's topic is obesity and metabolic syndrome. Coming to the learning points, these are the learning points. What is obesity? Factors affecting obesity, role of adipokines in obesity, control of food intake, complications of obesity, assessment of obesity, prevention and control of obesity, then what is metabolic syndrome and what are the complications of metabolic syndrome. As you know, obesity is affecting millions of people globally. It is increasing at an alarming rate throughout the world to the extent that it is now regarded as a pandemic. Obesity is defined as a condition of excess body fat or adipose tissue accumulation with multiple organ-specific consequences. Normally, body fat accounts for about 15% of total body weight. Body fat excess of that leads to obesity. Obesity is associated with a large number of debilitating and life-threatening disorders. Obesity has multifactorial etiology, which comprises genetics, environment, metabolism, lifestyle, and behavioral components. So all these factors contributes towards obesity. Complex interactions between genetic and environmental factors give rise to alterations of the endocrine and metabolic functions, which contributes to the pathogenesis of obesity. Obesity can occur at any age and generally increases with age. Infants with excessive weight gain have an increased incidence of obesity in later life. Coming to the factors affecting obesity, genetic factors. There is a genetic component in the etiology of obesity. Twin studies have shown a close correlation between the weights of identical twins, even when they are reared in dissimilar environments. Genes can contribute to obesity by causing abnormalities of one or more of the pathways that regulate the feeding centers and energy expenditure and fat storage. Physical inactivity. There is convincing evidence that regular physical activity is protective against unhealthy weight gain. Sedentary lifestyle, particularly sedentary occupation and inactive recreation such as watching television, promote obesity. Eating habits. Eating habits are established very early in life. The compositions of the diet, the periodicity with which it is eaten, and the amount of energy derived from it are all relevant to the etiology of obesity. A diet containing more energy than needed may lead to prolonged postprandial hyperlipidemia and to deposition of triglycerides in the adipose tissue, resulting in obesity. Drugs and endocrine factors. Use of certain drugs, example steroids, contraceptives, insulin, beta-adrenergic blockers, etc. can promote weight gain. Endocrine factors may be involved in occasional cases. Example, Cushing syndrome, polycystic ovarian disease, growth hormone deficiencies. So these endocrinal diseases may lead to obesity. Cushing syndrome, PCOD, growth hormone deficiency. Coming to the psychosocial factors, example, emotional disturbances are deeply involved in the etiology of obesity. Overeating may be a symptom of depression, anxiety, frustration, and loneliness in children as it is in adult life. Ethnicity. Ethnic groups in many industrialized countries appear to be especially susceptible to the development of obesity and its complications. Evidence suggests that this may be due to a genetic predisposition to obesity that only becomes apparent when such groups are exposed to a more affluent lifestyle. Obesity is due to an abnormal growth of the adipose tissue due to an enlargement of the fat cell size, that is hypertrophic obesity. That is the enlargement of fat cell size, or an increase in the fat cell number, that is hyperplastic obesity, or a combination of both. Adipose tissues are loose connective tissues that fill up space between organs and tissues. It is now recognized that white adipose tissues behaves also as endocrine tissue, producing multiple bioactive peptides, which not only influence adipocyte function but also affect more than one metabolic pathway. These adipose tissue-derived hormones are commonly termed adipokines. Important adipokines are leptin, adiponectin, adipsin, resistin, etc. In obesity, there is increased production of most adipokines, which impacts on multiple functions such as appetite and energy balance, insulin sensitivity, blood pressure, lipid metabolism, etc., all of which are linked with cardiovascular disease. Let's see the important metabolic functions of the major adipokines. So leptin, it improves insulin sensitivity, inhibits lipogenesis, increases lipolysis, and sends satiety signals. Adiponectin, it improves insulin sensitivity, increases fatty acid oxidation, inhibits gluconeogenesis. Adipsin inhibits lipolysis, increases fatty acid re-esterification, triglyceride storage in adipose cells. Resistin, it is involved with insulin resistance. Anything that leads to continuing imbalance between food intake and energy consumption will lead to obesity. When greater quantities of energy in the form of food enter the body than are expended, the body weight increases and most of the excess energy is stored as fat. For each 9.3 calories of excess energy that enter the body, approximately 1 gram of fat is stored. Fat is stored mainly in adipocytes, in subcutaneous tissue, and in the intraperitoneal cavity, although the liver and other tissues of the body often accumulate significant amounts of lipids in obese persons. Now let's see the control of food intake. Neural centers regulate food intake. The hypothalamus plays a pivotal role in the regulation of hunger, appetite, and satiety. The hypothalamus contains hunger and satiety centers. Several neuronal centers of the hypothalamus participate in the control of food intake. What are the important nuclei of the hypothalamus which controls the food intake? Let's see. The lateral nuclei of the hypothalamus, it serves as a feeding center. The ventromedial nuclei of the hypothalamus serve as a major satiety center. The paraventricular, dorsomedial, and arcuate nuclei of the hypothalamus also play a major role in regulating food intake. So we see that the most important control of food intake comes from the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus contains the lateral nuclei, which serves as the feeding center. Then the ventromedial nuclei, it serves as the satiety center, that is the feeling of fullness. That is the stomach is full and we don't require any more food. So the ventromedial nuclei of the hypothalamus, it serves as a major satiety center. So along with these centers, the arcuate nuclei, the paraventricular nuclei, and the dorsomedial nuclei also play a major role in the regulation of food intake. This hypothalamic nuclei also influence the secretion of several hormones that are important in regulating energy balance and metabolism, including those from the thyroid and adrenal glands, as well as the pancreatic islet cells. The hypothalamus receives neural signals from the GIT that provide sensory information about stomach filling, then chemical signals from nutrients in the blood, glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids that signify satiety, then signals from the GIT hormones, signals from hormones released by adipose tissue, and signals from the cerebral cortex, that is sight, smell, and taste, that influence feeding behavior. The hypothalamic feeding and satiety centers have a high density of receptors for neurotransmitters and hormones that influence feeding behavior. Substances that have been shown to alter appetite and feeding behavior in experimental studies are categorized as orexigenic substances that stimulate feeding or anorexigenic substances that inhibit feeding. So what are the anorexigenic substances? That is the substances which decrease feeding: alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, then leptin, serotonin, norepinephrine, corticotropin releasing hormone, insulin, cholecystokinin, glucagon-like peptide, cocaine and amphetamine regulated transcript card, peptide YY. Now let's see what are the orexigenic substances, that is which increases feeding: neuropeptide Y, agouti-related protein, melanin concentrating hormone, orexins A and B, endorphins, galanin, amino acids like glutamate and gamma aminobutyric acid, cortisol, ghrelin, and cannabinoids. Two distinct types of neurons in the arcuate nuclei of the hypothalamus are especially important as controllers of both appetite and energy expenditure. One is the POMC neurons and another is the NPY agouti-related protein neurons. Okay, so POMC, that is pro-opiomelanocortin neurons, they produce alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone together with cocaine and amphetamine related transcript card. And the neurons that produce the orexigenic substances are neuropeptide Y and agouti-related protein. So basically, these are the two types of neurons. The first one is the is related with the substances which decrease feeding, and the second one, this neurons produces the orexigenic substances or which increases the food intake. Activation of the POMC neurons decreases food intake and increases energy expenditure, whereas activation of the NPY AGRP neurons has the opposite effects, increasing food intake and reducing energy expenditure. So these two distinct types of neurons, they are present in the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. The POMC neurons release alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, which then acts on melanocortin receptors found in the neurons of the paraventricular nuclei. So these melanocortin receptors, they are found in the neuron of the paraventricular nuclei. At least 5 subtypes of melanocortin receptors, MCR, exist, among which MCR3 and MCR4 are especially important in regulating food intake and energy balance. The hypothalamic melanocortin system plays a powerful role in regulating energy stores of the body, and defective signaling of this pathway is associated with extreme obesity. In fact, mutations of MCR4 represent the most common known monogenic cause of human obesity. So this is the most important genetic mutation which may lead to obesity. There is mutation of the MCR4. In contrast, excessive activation of the melanocortin system reduces appetite. AGRP released from the orexigenic neurons of the hypothalamus is a natural antagonist of MCR3 and MCR4 and probably increases feeding by inhibiting the effects of alpha MSH to stimulate melanocortin receptors. NPY is also released from the orexigenic neurons of the arcuate nuclei. When energy stores of the body are low, orexigenic neurons are activated to release NPY, which stimulates appetite. At the same time, firing of the POMC neurons is reduced, thereby decreasing the activity of the melanocortin pathway and further stimulating appetite. So this is the important diagram. So you can see these are the two types of neurons present in the arcuate nucleus, POMC CART and AGRP NPY. So these neurons, they release alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, alpha MSH. So you see they're releasing the alpha MSH. Okay, here also alpha MSH. So due to this stimulation, what happens? Due to stimulation of the POMC CART, there is decreased food intake. This alpha MSH, they again stimulate the MCR4 receptors. So MCR4 receptors and MCR3 receptors, they are present in the neurons of the paraventricular PVN, that is paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus. So you see this POMC CART, they stimulate the release of alpha MSH, and this alpha MSH, they they stimulate melanocortin receptors. They stimulate the melanocortin receptors MCR4 in the paraventricular nuclei, which then activates. So this activates the neuronal pathways which stimulate the nucleus tractus solitarius and and due to this there is increased sympathetic activity and energy expenditure. So stimulation of these neurons, this will lead to decreased food intake and increase energy expenditure. Whereas this AGRP NPY, this group of neurons, whenever these neurons are stimulated, they release orexigenic substances and there is increased food intake. And these receptors also act as antagonists to the MCR4. So due to the stimulation of this group of neurons, there is increased food intake. Then insulin, leptin, and cholecystokinin, these hormones inhibit this AGRP and PY neurons and stimulate adjacent POMC CART neurons, thereby reducing food intake. So the hormones insulin, leptin, cholecystokinin all decrease the food intake, whereas ghrelin, they stimulate this AGRP and PY neurons and this ghrelin increases the food intake. Another aspect of feeding is the mechanical act of the feeding process. The actual mechanics of feeding are controlled by centers in the brainstem. The function of the other centers is to control the quantity of food intake and to excite the centers of the feeding mechanics to activity. Neural centers higher than the hypothalamus like amygdala and the prefrontal cortex also play important role in the control of appetite. Regulation of the quantity of food intake can be divided into short-term regulation, which is concerned primarily with preventing overeating at each meal, and long-term regulation, which is concerned primarily with maintenance of normal quantities of energy stores in the body. Short-term regulation. Several types of rapid feedback signals are important for short-term regulation. One such feedback is the GI feeling, gastrointestinal feeling. So gastrointestinal feeling inhibits the feeding. When the GIT becomes distended, especially the stomach and the duodenum, such inhibitory signals are transmitted mainly by way of the vagal to suppress the feeding centers, thereby reducing the desire for food. So GI feeling inhibits the feeding. So this is the short-term regulation of the control of feeding. Another is the GI hormones. Some GI hormones suppress feeding. Cholecystokinin, as already I have told, cholecystokinin released mainly in the response to fat and proteins entering the duodenum contribute to satiation and meal cessation. Peptide YY is secreted from the GIT, especially from the ileum and colon. Food intake stimulates release of PYY, which suppresses appetite and decreases food intake. The presence of food in the intestine stimulates secretion of glucagon-like peptide, GLP, which in turn enhances insulin production and secretion from the pancreas. GLP and insulin both tend to suppress appetite. Thus, eating a meal stimulates the release of several GI hormones that may induce satiety and reduce further intake of food. Ghrelin is a GI hormone released mainly by the oxyntic cells of the stomach, but also by the intestine. So this blood levels of ghrelin rise during fasting, peak just before eating, and then fall rapidly after a meal, suggesting a possible role in stimulating feeding. So ghrelin is the most important GI hormone which increases appetite or increases feeding. It is often called a hunger hormone because it increases food intake. So these are the feedback mechanisms for control of food intake, short-term regulation. So you can see here, leptin secreted by the adipocytes, leptin, PYY, cholecystokinin, insulin, all this, they inhibit the hypothalamus and the food intake is decreased. Whereas ghrelin, it stimulates the hypothalamus to increase the food intake. Also, the stretching of the stomach due to the filling of the stomach due to food, it also sends negative feedback and the hypothalamus is inhibited and the food intake is decreased. Long-term regulation of food intake. When the energy stores of the food fall below normal, the feeding centers of the hypothalamus and other areas of the brain become highly active, and the person exhibits increased hunger as well as the behavior of searching for food. Conversely, when the energy stores are already abundant, the person usually loses the sensation of hunger and develops a state of satiety. The long-term regulatory system for feeding, which includes all the nutritional energy feedback mechanisms, helps maintain constant stores of nutrients in the tissues, preventing them from becoming too low or too high. What are the long-term regulation? So effect of blood concentrations of glucose, amino acids, and lipids on hunger and feeding. A decrease in blood glucose concentration causes hunger, which has led to the so-called glucostatic theory of hunger and feeding regulation. Similar studies have demonstrated the same effect for blood amino acid concentration and blood concentration of breakdown products of lipids, such as the keto acids and some fatty acids, leading to the aminostatic and lipostatic theories of regulation. That is, when the availability of any of the three major types of food decreases, the desire for feeding is increased, eventually returning the blood metabolite concentration back towards normal. Feedback signals from adipose tissue regulate food intake. Studies in humans and in experimental animals indicate that the hypothalamus senses energy storage through the actions of leptin, a peptide hormone released from adipocytes. When the amount of adipose tissue increases, signaling excess energy storage, the adipocytes produce increased amounts of leptin, which is released into the blood. Leptin then circulates to the brain, where it moves across the blood-brain barrier by facilitated diffusion and occupies leptin receptors at multiple sites in the hypothalamus, especially the POMC and AGRP and PY neurons of the arcuate nuclei and neurons of the paraventricular nuclei. Stimulation of leptin receptors in this hypothalamic nuclei initiates multiple actions that decrease fat storage, including decreased production in the hypothalamus of appetite stimulators such as NPY and AGRP. Then activation of POMC neurons causing release of alpha MSH and activation of melanocortin receptors. Then increased production in the hypothalamus of substances such as corticotropin releasing hormone that decreases food intake. Then increased sympathetic nerve activity and decreased insulin secretion by the pancreatic beta cells, which decreases energy storage. Thus, leptin is an important means by which the adipose tissue signals the brain that enough energy has been stored and that intake of food is no longer necessary. In most obese humans, however, there does not appear to be a deficiency of leptin production because plasma leptin levels increase in proportion with increasing adiposity. Therefore, some physiologists believe that obesity may be associated with leptin resistance. That is, leptin receptors or post-receptor signaling pathways normally activated by leptin may be resistant to activation by leptin in obese people who continue to eat despite having very high levels of leptin. Higher functions also modulate the response that either trigger or inhibit food intake. Thus, food preferences, emotions, environment, lifestyle, and circadian rhythms may all have profound effects on whether food is sought or not, and the type of food that is ingested. So this is a summary of mechanisms which control the food intake. So modulating factors are liking, wanting, emotions, circadian rhythms, all this have modulating factors on the hypothalamus. Then central inhibitors, POMC, CART, CCK, norepinephrine, CRH, all this inhibits the hypothalamus and decreases food intake. Central stimuli, NPY, orexin A, cannabinoids, all these are stimulants and increase the food intake. So this hypothalamus controls the food intake. So due to this food intake again from the stomach, this food intake affects the stomach, adipose tissue, adrenals. So due to this amount of the food intake, and there will be secretion of the ghrelin or cortisol, which will, if the food intake is less, then the ghrelin cortisol will stimulate the central stimuli and there will be increased food intake. And if the food intake is proper, then this will stimulate the insulin, leptin, CCK, PYY. So this will again stimulate the central inhibitors and there will be decreased food intake. Coming to the complications of obesity, obesity is a health hazard and a detriment to well-being. It is a positive risk factor in the development of hypertension, coronary heart disease, diabetes, gallbladder disease, and certain types of cancer, especially colorectal cancer in males, and cancer of the gallbladder, biliary tract, breast, endometrium, and cervix in females. There are, in addition, several associated diseases which, although not usually fatal, cause a great deal of morbidity in the community. Example, varicose veins, abdominal hernia, osteoarthritis of the knees, hips and lumbar spine, flat feet, and psychological stresses, particularly during adolescence. Obese persons are exposed to increased risk from surgery. Obesity may lead to lowered fertility. It is suggested that obesity at age 40 years can reduce life expectancy by up to 7 years for non-smokers and by 13 years for smokers. Coronary heart disease and hypertension related complications are the major cause of death. So what are the diseases which are greatly increased? Type 2 diabetes, greatly increased due to obesity. Type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia, that is lipid disorders, then insulin resistance, breathlessness, sleep apnea. Then moderately increased coronary heart diseases, hypertension, osteoarthritis, hyperuricemia, and gout. Slightly increased cancer, polycystic ovary syndrome, then impaired fertility, low back pain due to obesity, then fetal defects associated with maternal obesity. So these are the different complications due to obesity. Endocrine, insulin resistance, impaired fasting glucose or glucose intolerance, type 2 diabetes, precocious puberty, menstrual irregularities, polycystic ovary syndrome in females, then hormone-related cancers, breast, endometrium, prostate. Then cardiovascular, hypertension, dyslipidemia, coagulopathy, chronic inflammation, endothelial dysfunction. Pulmonary, exercise intolerance, obstructive sleep apnea, asthma. Then GI, gallstones, gastroesophageal reflux, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, colon cancer. Then renal, glomerulosclerosis, renal cancer. Musculoskeletal, ankle sprains, flat feet, osteoarthritis, back pain. Then neurological, pseudotumor cerebri, psychosocial, eating disorders, poor self-esteem, body image disorder, social isolation and stigmatization, depression. So these are the different complications due to obesity. Coming to the assessment of obesity. The most widely used methods of assessment are BMI, body mass index. Body mass index is a simple index of weight for height that is commonly used to classify underweight, overweight, and obesity in adults. It is defined as the weight in kilograms divided by the square of the height in meters. So BMI is equal to weight in kilogram divided by height square, height in meter. The WHO has published international standards for classifying overweight and obesity in adults. The classification of overweight and obesity according to BMI is shown in the following table. So underweight, BMI less than 18.5. The normal range is the 18.5 to 24.99. Then overweight, 25 to 29.99. Obese class 1, 30 to 34.99. Obese class 2, 35 to 39.99. And obese class 3 is more than 40. So this is the WHO classification of obesity according to BMI. So what is the normal BMI? It is the 18.5 to 24.99. Obesity is classified as a BMI more than 30. Lower BMI thresholds for overweight and obesity have been proposed for the Asia-Pacific region since this population appears to be at risk for glucose and lipid abnormalities at lower body weights. Although it can be generally We assume that individuals with a BMI of 30 or above have an excess fat mass in their body. BMI does not distinguish between weight associated with muscle and weight associated with fat. As a result, the relationship between BMI and body fat content varies according to body build and proportion. And it has been shown repeatedly that at a given BMI may not correspond to the same degree of fatness across populations. Waist circumference. It is measured at the midpoint between the lower border of the rib cage and the iliac crest. It is a convenient and simple measurement that is unrelated to height. Correlates closely with BMI. There is an increased risk of metabolic complications for man with a waist circumference more than 102 centimeter and woman with a waist circumference more than 88 centimeter. Another measurement of obesity is the waist to hip ratio. Waist to hip ratio is the dimensionless ratio of the circumference of the waist to that of the hips. It is calculated as waist circumference divided by hip circumference. It is an approximate index of intra-abdominal fat mass and total body fat. A high WH, that is waist to hip ratio, that is more than 1 in man and 0.85 in woman, indicates abdominal fat accumulation. Skin fold thickness. It is a rapid and non-invasive method for assessing body fat. Several varieties of calipers, example, Harpenden skin calipers, are available for the purpose. The measurements are taken at all the 4 sides, mid-triceps, biceps, subscapular, and suprailiac regions. The sum of the measurements should be less than 40 mm in boys and 50 mm in girls. Unfortunately, standards for subcutaneous fat do not exist for comparison. Further, in extreme obesity, measurements may be impossible. The main drawback of skin fold measurement is their poor repeatability. So these are the important methods by which we can assess the obesity. Coming to the prevention and control of obesity, weight control is widely defined as approaches to maintaining weight within the healthy range of body mass index, that is 18.5 to 24.9 kg per meter square throughout the adulthood. It should also include prevention of weight gain of more than 5 kilo in all people. In those who are already overweight, a reduction of 5 to 10% of body weight is recommended as an initial goal. Prevention of obesity should begin in early childhood. Obesity is harder to treat in adults than in children. The control of obesity centers on weight reduction. This can be achieved by dietary changes, increased physical activity, and a combination of both. Regular physical exercise is the key to weight reducing program. As body weight increases, insulin resistance increases. That is, there is a decreased ability of insulin to move glucose into fat and muscle and to shut off glucose released from the liver. Weight reduction decreases insulin resistance. Associated with obesity, there is hyperinsulinemia, dyslipidemia, and accelerated development of atherosclerosis. This combination of finding is commonly called the metabolic syndrome or syndrome X. So coming to the metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, it is also known as syndrome X or insulin resistance syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is a cluster of metabolic disorders. When a patient presents with these conditions together, the chances for future cardiovascular disease is greater than any of the factor presenting alone. The metabolic syndrome consists of a constellation of metabolic abnormalities that confer increased risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes mellitus. Metabolic syndrome is a serious health condition that affects about 23% of adults and places them at higher risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and stroke. The major features of the metabolic syndrome include central obesity, hypertriglyceridemia, low levels of HDL cholesterol, hyperglycemia, and hypertension. So these are the main features of metabolic syndrome. There is central obesity, that is more amount of fat is stored in the hips and in the central part of the body. Then hypertriglyceridemia, that is triglyceride level is more. Then low level of HDL cholesterol, then hyperglycemia and hypertension. Metabolic syndrome occurs when a person has 3 or more of the following measurements. Waist circumference more than 102 centimeter in man and 88 centimeter, more than 88 centimeter in women. Then triglyceride level more than 150 milligram per dl. HDL cholesterol less than 40 milligram per dl in man or less than 50 milligram per dl in women. Then systolic BP is more than 130 millimeter mercury or diastolic BP is more than 90 millimeter mercury. Then fasting glucose is more than 100 milligram per dl. So if a person has 3 or more of the following measurement, then he may have metabolic syndrome. Coming to the complications of metabolic syndrome. So the main complication of metabolic syndrome is the atherosclerosis, that is hardening of the arteries. Then diabetes, then cardiovascular diseases. Cardiovascular diseases is a result of the atherosclerosis. Then kidney disease, stroke, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, peripheral artery diseases. So these are the important complications of metabolic syndrome. If diabetes develops, there may be risk for additional health complications, including eye damage, that is diabetic retinopathy, then nerve damage, diabetic neuropathy, and kidney disease. So although metabolic syndrome is a serious condition, the risk can be reduced significantly by reducing weight, increasing physical activity, eating a heart-healthy diet that is rich in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and fish, and working with healthcare provider to monitor and manage blood glucose, blood cholesterol, and blood pressure. Coming to the eating disorders. So two of the major eating disorders are anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. Two of the major eating disorders are found primarily in adolescent girls and young women. The typical person with anorexia nervosa becomes pathologically obsessed with her weight and body image. She may decrease her food intake so severely that she may die of starvation. There are many other abnormalities associated with anorexia nervosa: cessation of menstrual periods, low blood pressure, low body temperature, hypoglycemia, and altered blood concentrations of many hormones, including ghrelin. So anorexia nervosa, it is generally found in young women and adolescent girls. Another disorder is the bulimia nervosa. This, usually called simply bulimia, is a disorder characterized by recurrent episodes of binge eating. This usually associated with regular self-induced vomiting and use of laxatives or diuretics, as well as strict dieting, fasting, or vigorous exercise to lose weight or to prevent weight gain. Like individuals with anorexia nervosa, those with bulimia manifest a persistent heightened concern with body weight, although they generally remain within 10% of their ideal weight. This disorder too is accompanied by a variety of physiological abnormalities. Thank you.